Our fourth and final assignment is the current event analysis essay. Basically, this takes the work we did on the press review and carries it one step further. We are going to be analyzing a current event, anything in the news, either nationally or internationally, using reputable news outlets or scholarly sources. You can use sources from critical journals, from library sources and databases, and you can also use reputable news outlets. You have to have a total of 4 sources in your essay, and that should mean you end up with 2 for at least one side of the essay or the issue, and at least 2 for the other side, because you're going to be covering both sides of the issue. The example I give in the assignment sheet is that if you're writing about, if it's 2003 and you're writing about the Second Gulf War and the initial U.S. ground invasion of Iraq through Kuwait, you might have you would need to have pro-invasion sources and anti-war or anti-invasion sources. You can find plenty of both. This is not to say there can only be 2 sides to an issue. There may be, well, 3 or 4 or 5 sides to your issue, but you have to have at least 2 sides represented in your essay, because we're trying to get an idea of the entire issue, and the best way to do that is to look at both sides so that we can then kind of decide which side we think has the most merit, maybe both have some merit, and how we feel or think about this issue as a whole. And I say that in the assignment sheet, you don't have to simply say side X is wrong, side Y is right, because it's rarely that simple. Even though on Facebook and in our own heads, it's very often easy to think, okay, this is right, here's how I feel, the other side is totally wrong, and just go on with your day. But reality is often much more complicated than that, almost always. And this is what the essay is trying to get to. It's due by the end of the day, not 9 a.m., but the end of the day on Monday, July 27th. And in the assignment sheet, I also give a sample layout of the essay with comments for each paragraph explaining my reasoning. So I use as an example Kanye West's 2020 candidacy for the U.S. presidency, which is something that is ongoing. In the sample, I'm writing as though 2020 is in the past, and I'm thus able to have kind of a complete picture of his candidacy, which, because it's still ongoing, is not a closed book. Now, that doesn't mean you can't write about something ongoing. That's the whole point of a current event. Excuse me. But for the sake of the example, I wrote as if it were, 2021 and this had just happened. So I introduce with what I call the top-down method, which is where we start broad and then we kind of narrow in on our main idea. And then I give 3 body paragraphs to one side of the issue, which is the kind of Kanye West is sort of nuts and his ideas don't make sense and his candidacy is not something we should take seriously. The first 3 body paragraphs are devoted to that side, and I bring in specific sources. The Wall Street Journal interviewing his wife, who is a celebrity in her own right. The Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, what he says about West, and then West's own words, his campaign speeches. And then for 2 paragraphs, I cover the other side of the issue, the pro-West side, or the side that says, whatever else West may be, he has some interesting ideas and we have to pay attention to him. And I use Planned Parenthood and then Fox News, an imaginary interview with Sean Hannity, who's a nationally known news host. And this is important because in covering the pro-West side, I'm using a very left source, Planned Parenthood, and a very right source, Sean Hannity. And that can be a clever rhetorical move in your essay, because whatever side of whatever issue you're analyzing, it helps if you bring in sources from across the political spectrum, because that shows that it's not just one group of people feeling a certain way. For example, if you're talking about a vaccine for the coronavirus, and some people are saying this is a great idea, we need to get this in production as soon as possible, and some other people are saying no, we need to not put this into production, we need to spend a year testing it, it's not safe. If you can find sources from both the left and the right of the political spectrum supporting a given position, it shows that that position may be worth thinking about, because everyone is kind of giving it consideration. And then in the conclusion to the sample essay, I make an evaluation, and that's important. Your essay needs to include an evaluation or a judgment of some kind. And again, this doesn't need to be side X is right, side Y is wrong, but it does need to kind of take the information you have in the essay and then synthesize it in an evaluative way. Another way of considering this is thesis, antithesis, synthesis. That's what this approach is called, where thesis, and we've used the word thesis before, right, is one side of an issue. In this case, here's one side. Antithesis is exactly what it sounds like, antithesis, the other side of the issue. So we first cover one side, then the other side, and then we synthesize. If you've taken chemistry, you know to synthesize two things is to take two separate things, blend them together in a way that doesn't merely mix them, but creates an entirely new thing. And that's what synthesis is. It is where you take the two sides of your essay and say, okay, we've got these positions, here's what I think. That is essentially our fourth assignment. We do not need to turn in an outline for it. We have 5 days to get it completed. And this is what I want us to focus on. We can use the sources in our press review that we've already evaluated as secondary sources. And of course, we can go out and find new secondary sources now that we have gone through the press review and we know how to kind of vet news outlets and scholarly sources. You can also use Google Scholar and the library databases as discussed in the Scholarly Research Pocket Guide, which is linked on our Blackboard page under week 1 or 2. As always, email me if you have any questions or concerns, and good luck.